Thoughts can build you or break you. The difference is whether you're running them or they're running you. Every decision, reaction, and habit begins with what happens inside your head long before you move. When the mind is scattered, life feels chaotic, but when it's trained, everything starts aligning with precision. Mastery begins the moment you stop believing every thought that appears and start choosing which ones deserve power. You don't fight the noise, you guide it. You shape it. You direct it towards something that matters. Control isn't about silence. It's about command. Once your thinking follows your focus, your actions become unstoppable. You start working smarter, moving sharper, and living with intent. You stop existing in reaction and start creating results. Because when the mind obeys purpose, reality obeys you. The mind was never built to run non-stop. Yet that's exactly what it's been trained to do. It replays old mistakes, predicts worst-case scenarios, and analyzes every detail until peace becomes impossible. Overthinking feels productive, but it's not thinking, it's mental noise disguised as logic. You start mistaking movement for progress, and soon you're trapped in a cycle that feels active but changes nothing. Every time you overthink, you create distance between what's happening and what's real. The brain spins stories that never existed, trying to prepare you for problems that don't exist either. It's like living in a house where every door leads to another room of doubt. You start building fear out of imagination and then living inside it as if it's fact. The overthinking mind is addicted to control. It believes if it can predict enough outcomes, it can prevent pain. But that's an illusion. Control doesn't come from prediction. It comes from perspective. The more you try to think your way to safety, the further you move from clarity. You drown in details that never needed your attention in the first place. It begins with something small, a comment, a glance, a delay. The mind grabs it and refuses to let go. It replays the moment, rewrites it, adds new layers of meaning that never existed. Soon, what was a small moment becomes an entire theory. You've built a storm from a spark, and the noise starts feeling normal. Overthinking is the brain's way of trying to feel in control when it's scared. The loop is comfort disguised as awareness. You believe you're solving something, but you're really just avoiding silence. The mind craves stimulation, even if it's negative. It would rather replay pain than sit in peace. The real problem isn't the thoughts, it's your attachment to them. Every thought demands to be taken seriously, and you obey automatically. You've never learned to filter, only to react. The moment a thought appears, you feed it with focus, and it grows stronger. You've become loyal to the noise that drains you. Breaking free from overthinking starts with realizing you're not the voice in your head, you're the one listening to it. The machine runs on automatic, but awareness gives you the power to unplug. The goal isn't to stop thinking, it's to stop believing every thought that appears. That's where control begins. When you overthink, you mistake analysis for action. You plan, you predict, but nothing moves. The energy that should build your life is trapped in mental loops. You're rehearsing experiences that never happen. Overthinking is like revving an engine in neutral, loud, exhausting, and going nowhere. The mind learns what you reward. If you feed overthinking with attention, it grows. But if you starve it with awareness, it weakens. The next time your brain spirals, don't fight it, observe it. Let it spin without reacting. You'll notice that thoughts lose strength when you stop participating in them. Stillness feels uncomfortable to an overactive mind. That's why distraction feels easier than reflection. But silence is the detox the brain resists most. In silence, you confront your patterns without escape. You start noticing how much of your thinking isn't useful, it's habitual. The overthinking machine thrives on assumptions. It fills gaps in information with worst-case scenarios. A late text becomes rejection. A quiet day becomes failure. The mind hates not knowing, so it invents answers. Awareness is what stops you from buying those lies. Most people try to control their thoughts by force, by thinking positive or suppressing the negative, but that's still overthinking, just with better marketing. Real control comes from observation, not opposition. When you stop fighting thoughts, they stop fighting back. The brain repeats what feels familiar. Overthinking isn't random, it's routine. You've trained it to spiral whenever uncertainty appears, but routines can be reprogrammed. When you start responding with calm instead of panic, the brain learns a new pattern: stability. The secret is to replace mental noise with mental focus. Overthinking is scattered energy. Mastery is concentrated energy. When you direct thought toward purpose, the noise loses power. Focus doesn't mean thinking less, it means thinking clearly. Awareness turns the machine off, one switch at a time. You notice the moment your thoughts start spinning. You feel the tension building. Instead of diving in, you step back. That pause is everything. It's where reaction turns into reflection, where you regain control. Freedom from overthinking doesn't mean silence. It means clarity. You'll still think, but you'll think with direction. The thoughts no longer pull you into emotional chaos. They pass through without leaving damage. You start to see thinking as a tool, not a trap. Once you stop identifying with the noise, it becomes background sound. The voice loses authority. You realize you can observe your thoughts without obeying them. That realization is freedom. The mind was never your prison, it was your untrained engine. Overthinking collapses when you introduce certainty. Not certainty about outcomes, but certainty about yourself. The moment you decide you can handle whatever comes, the loop loses purpose. The mind only overthinks when it doesn't trust the person thinking. You don't escape the overthinking machine by turning it off, you outgrow it. Awareness replaces reaction. Focus replaces fear, and discipline replaces doubt. The same mind that once exhausted you becomes your most powerful weapon. You stop thinking just to survive and start thinking to create. When the machine finally quiets, the silence feels unfamiliar, then addictive. You begin to crave peace more than control. That's when you know the mind no longer owns you. You've taken the seat back. The engine still runs, but now it drives where times tell it to go. The mistake most people make is trying to control the world instead of mastering the part of them that reacts to it. Every frustration, every burst of anger, every disappointment comes from the illusion that you can force life to move in your timing. But reality doesn't obey your expectations, it reflects your mindset. The more you try to control what happens, the more powerless you feel. The moment you learn to control what times thinks asterisk, everything outside begins to adjust naturally. Control isn't about domination, it's about direction. When your thoughts are scattered, even simple things feel heavy. When your focus is steady, even chaos becomes manageable. The external world will always shift. People will disappoint you. Plans will break. Time will move faster than you can plan for. But your mind doesn't have to collapse with it. Mastering your inner world is how you gain influence over the outer one. Most people live reacting, not responding. They chase control through outcomes, through people, through success metrics. But the real power comes from being unmoved by temporary circumstances. When you stop trying to control what's unpredictable, your energy becomes concentrated on what truly matters: your perception, your patience, your precision. That's where leadership over yourself begins. Every situation comes with two layers: what happens and how you think about it. The first is out of your hands. The second defines your entire experience. Two people can live the same event. One breaks, the other builds. The difference isn't luck, it's mental control. The world stays the same, but the mind filters it differently. Trying to control life is exhausting because you're fighting a moving target. You can't stop the weather, people's opinions, or the randomness of time. But you can decide how much of your peace you'll let those things touch. The moment you protect your mental space, everything external loses its grip. The storm might continue, you just stop standing in the rain. Your mind is a filter, not a victim. Everything that happens passes through it, and you choose what meaning it holds. When you take command of that filter, disappointment stops feeling final, and problems start turning into patterns you can decode. Control what thinks, and you automatically control how life feels. The ones who thrive aren't those who control everything. They're the ones who don't fall apart when nothing goes as planned. They understand that stability doesn't come from perfect conditions. It comes from internal structure. You can't predict every outcome, but you can predict your own mindset. That's what makes you unshakable. Learning to control what thinks requires honesty. You start noticing how much of your inner dialogue isn't even yours. It's noise borrowed from society, fear, and old habits. The more aware you become of what's running your thoughts, the more power you have to rewrite them. You stop letting borrowed beliefs make decisions on your behalf. Control doesn't mean suppression. It doesn't mean ignoring anger, fear, or doubt. It means understanding them without letting them drive. The moment you realize feelings are signals, not instructions, you regain authority. When you control what thinks, time slows down. You stop reacting instantly and start observing. That split second of awareness between emotion and action becomes your power zone. Most people speak or act before they've even processed reality. You don't. You wait. You think. You move with precision instead of panic. The world constantly tempts you to react, to defend yourself, to prove a point, to respond fast. But fast isn't power. Accurate is power. When your thinking becomes disciplined, you no longer feel rushed by external noise. You start controlling your pace, your energy, your response. The result is clarity that others mistake for confidence. Control what thinks, and you stop leaking energy. Every argument you don't need, every distraction you ignore, every emotion you guide instead of obey, all of it adds up to power conserved. That conservation builds presence. People can feel when you're not easily moved. That's influence without effort. The mind becomes easier to manage once you stop identifying with every thought it produces. You're not your fear, your insecurity, or your impulse. You're the observer behind all of it. When you step into that position, control stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like peace. You're no longer dragged, you're directing. There will always be things beyond your reach, timing, reactions, outcomes, but the power to interpret never leaves your hands. That's the invisible control most people overlook. You may not change the situation, but you can change the story you tell yourself about it. That's how you stay stable in unstable environments. The mind learns control through repetition. Each time you catch yourself spiraling and redirect, you build a new default setting. You start responding differently to familiar chaos. The same challenges show up, but your reaction evolves. Eventually, peace becomes your natural position, not your temporary escape. External control creates pressure. Internal control creates power. When you stop managing everything around you, you start managing yourself efficiently. You see the pattern, you understand the trigger, and you adjust your perception faster than the problem grows. That's real strategy, silent and internal. People often confuse control with coldness, but there's nothing emotionless about clarity. When you manage what thinks, you feel everything more consciously without drowning in it. You're not shutting down your emotions, you're upgrading your awareness. Emotions become data, instead of dominance. The more you train your mind to stay grounded, the less the outside world can manipulate you. You stop chasing validation or running from rejection. You become neutral to extremes. Wins don't inflate you. Losses don't define you. You start moving from consistency, not reaction. Control stops feeling like effort, it becomes rhythm. You don't have to think about staying calm. You just are. The mind that once panicked at uncertainty now uses it as practice. You've built trust in your ability to adapt, not control everything. That's real confidence, the kind that no situation can take. When you control what thinks, you no longer chase outcomes. You attract alignment. You're no longer reactive to life. You're responsive to it. Circumstances don't need to change for you to feel powerful, because your power isn't borrowed from them anymore. It's built within. The world keeps moving, but now it moves times around times, your focus not through it. The mind doesn't start disciplined, it starts wild. It's built to chase impulses, replay emotions, and follow every spark of distraction it finds. Left untrained, it becomes the loudest enemy in the room, pulling you away from focus every time something shiny appears. Obedience isn't about control through fear, it's about structure through awareness. The mind learns direction when you stop letting it run wherever it wants and start teaching it what deserves attention. Every strong mind begins in chaos. Discipline is forged by repetition, not inspiration. The moment you decide that not every thought deserves action, the mind begins to bend toward order. Obedience sounds harsh, but it's freedom disguised as control, because the moment your mind listens, your life finally moves with purpose. You don't have to silence your thoughts, you just have to make them serve the mission. Obedience isn't about killing emotion, it's about teaching emotion when to speak. You train your thoughts the same way you'd train muscle memory, through consistency and boundaries. Each time you resist an impulse that doesn't serve you, the mind learns who's in charge. Over time, it starts obeying focus instead of fear. The undisciplined mind loves comfort. It feeds on stimulation, scrolling, gossip, validation, anything that feels easy and instant. But that comfort is how control slips away. The obedient mind, however, is built on delay. It chooses progress over pleasure, clarity over chaos. It's not numb, it's strategic. It doesn't react, it selects. Teaching your mind obedience means breaking your emotional habits. The thoughts that constantly interrupt you, they're patterns, not truth. When you stop feeding them, they lose their grip. At first, the resistance feels unbearable, but that discomfort is the friction of change. The mind resists what it's not used to, and obedience is its first unfamiliar language. An obedient mind doesn't run from emotion, it regulates it. You begin to recognize that not every burst of anger or insecurity deserves expression. Awareness becomes the leash that holds thoughts steady until you're ready to act with clarity. Obedience doesn't suffocate emotion, it shapes it into energy that can be used instead of wasted. You don't control your mind with force, you train it with repetition. Every time you bring it back to focus after it drifts, you're teaching it direction. That small act builds mental endurance. Over time, distractions still appear, but they don't pull you the same way. The obedient mind doesn't need silence to stay still. It creates silence wherever it goes. The strongest minds aren't the ones that never drift, they're the ones that always return. Obedience is in the return. When you catch yourself lost in noise and come back to purpose, that's control. The world won't stop testing you, but your ability to return faster means you stay ahead. A disobedient mind will always look for shortcuts. It wants reward without routine, success without structure. But real mastery doesn't come from sudden change. It comes from consistent self-command. You don't need a new mindset every day. You need one trained mind that listens when everything else is loud. The mind becomes obedient through evidence. The more you act with control, the more it trusts your leadership. When you make a decision and stay with it even when it's hard, your mind learns loyalty. It starts believing that you follow through, so it stops fighting direction. Confidence isn't built on words, it's built on follow-through. The obedient mind learns to pause. It doesn't rush decisions or drown in impulse. It observes first, acts later. That space between thought and reaction is where maturity grows. It's where wisdom replaces emotion. Obedience sharpens instinct because it removes the noise that clouds it. Obedience isn't submission, it's cooperation. Your mind isn't your servant, it's your system. You train it to function under pressure, so it can protect you when things fall apart. The mind that obeys awareness doesn't collapse under emotion. It stands firm when logic is needed most. The undisciplined mind chases mood. The trained one chases mission. Feelings change every hour, but direction holds steady. When the mind obeys a larger vision, momentary discomfort stops being a problem. You no longer need motivation, you run on structure. That's how discipline becomes automatic. An obedient mind can't coexist with clutter. You start simplifying what you consume. Less noise, fewer opinions, cleaner input. The more clarity you feed it, the better it performs. You become intentional with everything you allow in. The result is precision. Your focus stops leaking into meaningless places. The mind doesn't learn obedience in easy seasons. It's built through conflict moments where you want to quit but don't. Times when emotion wants to react but you wait. Each test becomes a repetition in mental strength training. You fail sometimes, but failure is feedback. Even disobedience teaches control when you study it. When your mind starts obeying you, your energy multiplies. You stop wasting time recovering from emotional decisions. You stop starting over because you stayed consistent. The peace that follows is not stillness, it's momentum without resistance. That's when you realize obedience isn't restriction, it's power streamlined. A disciplined mind isn't emotionless, it's emotionally intelligent. It feels deeply but doesn't lose direction. When others spiral in reaction, you stay grounded in reason. The calm you project is not luck, it's structure, built from thousands of moments where you could have lost control but didn't. Obedience becomes identity. You don't have to force focus, you naturally default to it. The mind that once resisted order now craves it. It finds peace in discipline because chaos no longer feels comfortable. You've retrained it to see control as freedom, not limitation. The more obedient your mind becomes, the more flexible you grow. You adapt faster because your reactions are chosen, not triggered. That adaptability gives you confidence in uncertainty. You no longer need to predict everything, you trust your mind to handle anything. That's the quiet power of self-command. When the mind finally learns obedience, life stops feeling like constant damage control. You move with direction instead of reaction. Challenges still appear, but they meet a leader, not a follower. You're not ruled by thought anymore, you're directing it. That's the difference between noise and control, chaos and command, surviving and mastering. Distraction is the silent thief that takes everything valuable from you: time, focus, consistency, and peace. It doesn't demand permission, it only needs access. The more you engage with it, the more it rewires your attention span until focus starts feeling foreign. You tell yourself you'll only check for a minute, but that minute becomes an hour, and the hour becomes a cycle. The mind learns to crave interruptions more than progress. Every time you pause your focus to entertain a distraction, you teach your brain that nothing deserves full attention. You start chasing the next notification, the next thought, the next fix of stimulation. It feels harmless, but it trains mental weakness. You stop building depth and start living in fragments, half listening, half working, half present everywhere. The truth is, Distraction doesn't fight for control, it waits for permission. It disguises itself as rest, as curiosity, as just one more check. But every small compromise is an agreement you make with mediocrity. Focus isn't destroyed by chaos. It's traded away in tiny, seemingly harmless negotiations. You don't overcome distraction by adding discipline, you remove negotiation. Every time you justify the interruption, you lose power. The mind starts believing that focus is flexible, that commitment can bend. But when focus becomes non-negotiable, you start operating differently. You no longer think about staying on task, you just do. Distraction wins because it knows your weakness. It doesn't attack your strength, it tempts your curiosity. It offers instant reward where focus demands delayed payoff. That's why discipline feels heavy. It doesn't feed your dopamine. It builds your direction. And most people quit because the noise feels more comfortable than the silence required to think deeply. Negotiating with distraction is like trying to stay dry in the rain by stepping halfway under cover. You can't win halfway. You either choose clarity or chaos. The mind doesn't obey mixed signals. When you give it two commands, focus and scroll, work and wander, it defaults to the easier one. That's not failure, that's design. The strongest people aren't immune to distraction. They've just stopped arguing with it. They don't waste energy deciding whether to focus. They've already made that decision long before the temptation appears. Focus becomes identity, not effort. Once you stop negotiating, the noise loses its influence. Every time you say, "I'll just take a quick break," your mind learns that focus is optional. The result isn't rest, it's fragmentation. You're never fully working or fully relaxing. You live in the in-between, where everything feels busy but nothing moves forward. Distraction doesn't steal your time, it divides it until it's worthless. The most dangerous distractions aren't digital, they're mental. Regret, comparison, overthinking. These are internal apps running in the background. They drain energy faster than any screen. You can't delete them, but you can stop opening them. Attention is your most expensive currency, and the mind spends it carelessly until you teach it value. You can't multitask mastery. You can do many things at once, but you can't do them well. Focus sharpens precision. Distraction spreads mediocrity. Every time you split your energy, you dull your edge. Success isn't built from endless motion, it's built from sustained direction. Distraction often disguises itself as productivity. You check emails, rearrange tasks, or read about success instead of building it. The brain loves the illusion of progress because it feels safe movement without risk. But comfort isn't the goal, completion is. Focus turns movement into momentum. The battle against distraction isn't external, it's chemical. Every ping, scroll, or alert releases dopamine, training your brain to chase novelty over depth. Breaking that loop feels uncomfortable because your brain has been conditioned to expect constant stimulation. The withdrawal is real, but so is the clarity that follows it. The mind becomes powerful when it learns to do one thing fully. Deep focus is rare because it requires silence, patience, and boredom, all things the modern world avoids. But inside that silence, the best ideas surface. Distraction kills creativity because it replaces thinking with consumption. You can't create while you're busy reacting. When you stop negotiating with distraction, your standards rise. You stop settling for fragmented effort and half-finished work. You begin to value mental stillness as much as physical rest. Productivity turns into precision, fewer tasks, done better. You don't just get more done, you get the right things done. You can't eliminate distraction completely, but you can control exposure. Every choice is a filter. The content you consume, the people you allow near your energy, the routines you repeat, all of it shapes your focus. The mind follows the environment that feeds it. Build one that makes clarity automatic. Distraction thrives in indecision. When you hesitate, you give it space. The moment you hesitate to commit, the mind looks for alternatives, comfort, escape, entertainment. But when your direction is firm, distraction has nowhere to live. Certainty kills temptation. To regain control, you need friction. Make distractions harder to reach. Turn off alerts. Move the noise out of sight. Create barriers between impulse and action. Each layer of resistance gives your focus time to catch up. That delay saves hours of lost attention. Your relationship with focus changes. It's no longer a discipline you chase, it's an environment you maintain. You start seeing the cost of interruption in real numbers: lost hours, reduced clarity, broken rhythm. That awareness becomes motivation. You don't fear distraction, you simply outgrow it. When the mind learns that focus isn't up for debate, distractions stop feeling tempting. They lose their pull because you've already decided they're not an option. That's what real mental control looks like. Not perfect silence, but selective attention. You stop chasing noise and start choosing depth. And once distraction no longer negotiates with you, time starts multiplying. Your energy stays consistent, your thoughts stay sharp, and your results start compounding. Focus turns into freedom not because you control everything, but because you finally control what matters. The noise stays loud, but you've learned how to stay unavailable. Most people live on autopilot, same reactions, same emotions, same decisions dressed in new days. They think they're choosing, but they're really repeating. Automatic mode feels safe because it removes effort, but it also removes awareness. You start surviving instead of creating. The same habits that once helped you cope quietly become chains that stop you from evolving. Automatic mode doesn't ask for permission. It just takes over. You wake up, scroll, repeat. You speak before thinking, react before observing, and rush before deciding. The mind convinces you it's efficiency, but it's really escape. Escape from uncertainty, discomfort, and conscious effort. Awareness demands energy, and autopilot is the lazy alternative. The cost of staying in automatic mode is invisible at first. You don't feel the damage right away because the brain confuses familiarity with safety. But every automatic decision made without intention is a vote for stagnation. The longer you stay asleep to your own patterns, the more predictable you become, and predictable minds are easy to control. Turning off automatic mode starts with discomfort. The moment you question your own habits, the mind resists. It tells you you're fine, that change isn't necessary, that awareness can wait until later. But later never comes. You can't rewrite your life with the same thoughts that built your routine. Automatic mode thrives in repetition without reflection. It makes you mistake motion for direction. You keep moving, but not progressing. You keep working, but not building. The difference between being busy and being conscious is intention, and intention is what the machine tries hardest to erase. To break the loop, you have to interrupt it. Awareness begins the moment you stop running your life like a background process. The next time you find yourself reacting instantly, pausing to think instead, you're already rewiring the system. The gap between impulse and choice is where real control begins. Automatic mode loves emotional shortcuts. It makes you defend before listening, doubt before trying, and quit before failing. These are preloaded settings, patterns learned from fear and repetition. Turning them off doesn't require perfection, it requires presence. You start catching yourself mid-pattern and asking, is this me or my programming? Awareness hurts because it exposes how mechanical you've become. It shows you that most of what you call personality is really pattern. The jokes you tell, the people you chase, the fears you feed, all built from repetition. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the awakening every controlled mind resists. You can't think freely while running the same mental code. The brain defaults to the most practiced response. That's why growth feels unnatural. It's a manual override of instinct. Every conscious choice feels slower, heavier, harder. But that weight is the friction of transformation. It's proof you're actually choosing. Automatic mode keeps you comfortable but powerless. It tells you you're in control while quietly steering every decision. You think you're leading your life, but you're following a script written by habit and environment. To reclaim authorship, you have to start making the invisible visible, tracing every automatic yes and turning it into a deliberate why. When you turn off automatic mode, you realize how much of your life has been reaction. You see how easily emotions manipulate thought, how external noise rewrites internal logic. You start separating feeling from fact, impulse from instinct. You begin choosing response instead of surrendering to repetition. This level of awareness demands patience. The mind doesn't give up control easily. It thrives on speed. It will try to rush you back into old rhythms where it feels safe. But real control is slow, at first deliberate, intentional, uncomfortable. You have to learn how to live without autopilot, even when it feels inefficient. Automatic mode can't survive observation. The moment you watch it, it weakens. You start noticing how predictable you are. The same excuses, the same distractions, the same emotional triggers. The more you witness your patterns, the less they own you. That's not judgment. That's liberation in progress. Every moment of awareness cuts power from the loop. You begin building small habits of consciousness, breathing before replying, pausing before reacting, questioning before assuming. Each micro-decision reclaims a fragment of your attention. Piece by piece, you start owning your mind again. Turning off automatic mode isn't about becoming robotic, it's about becoming present. You start designing your day instead of drifting through it. You choose what to consume, what to say, what to think. It's not control by suppression. It's control through intention. Awareness replaces routine, and clarity replaces rush. You'll notice that the world tries to pull you back into autopilot. Ads, entertainment, noise, all designed to keep you distracted enough to forget who's driving. But the trained mind sees through it. It recognizes manipulation and chooses mindfulness over momentum. That's how focus becomes resistance. The mind doesn't fear exhaustion. It fears awareness. Awareness forces accountability. You can't blame distraction when you're the one giving it attention. You can't blame habit when you're choosing comfort over growth. When you accept that, the excuses start dissolving and discipline starts forming. The more you practice presence, the quieter the mental noise becomes. You stop needing external validation to feel progress. You measure growth not by what you gain, but by what no longer controls you. The reward of awareness isn't comfort, it's clarity. You start living as the thinker, not the thought. Presence becomes your new baseline. The things that once triggered autopilot, anger, fear, routine, now trigger awareness. You respond with understanding, not reaction. The same world exists, but your experience of it changes completely. Automatic mode no longer defines you, it serves you. When you finally turn off automatic mode, life slows down, not because you're doing less, but because you're finally doing it consciously. You stop being a passenger and become the driver again. Every decision becomes deliberate. Every thought carries weight. That's not control by force, it's control by awareness. The mind stops wandering, and for the first time, it starts listening. Focus isn't natural, it's trained. The mind wasn't designed to stay still in a world full of movement. It was built to chase everything that flashes. But when you learn to direct that chaos into one clear target, focus becomes your sharpest weapon. It cuts through noise, emotion, and distraction with precision. The difference between scattered effort and focused energy is the difference between movement and mastery. Every strong mind started with a weak one that learned how to aim. You can't control everything around you, but you can control where your attention lives. When you stop giving energy to what doesn't matter, your power multiplies. Focus isn't about doing more, it's about doing what actually moves the needle. The sharper your attention, the less life feels random. Focus doesn't require motivation, it requires discipline. Discipline isn't exciting, it's repetition in the dark when no one is watching. You don't train focus through inspiration, you train it through consistency. Every time you bring your attention back after it wanders, you strengthen mental endurance. Focus is built like muscle through controlled resistance. You have to understand what steals your focus before you can train it. Distraction isn't an accident, it's a strategy. The world is designed to hijack your attention because attention is currency. Every click, scroll, and emotional reaction has a cost. If you don't direct your focus, someone else will monetize it for you. The first rule of focus training is simple: starve what scatters you. Every notification, every unnecessary conversation, every mental loop, they're leaks in your energy tank. Focus doesn't thrive in clutter, it thrives in clarity. The cleaner your environment, both mental and physical, the stronger your aim becomes. When you train focus, you stop chasing stimulation and start building depth. Shallow attention produces shallow results. Deep focus requires stillness, not the absence of noise, but the ability to stay centered inside it. The weapon of focus isn't sharp because it's fast, it's sharp because it's steady. You learn that focus is an act of aggression against distraction. It's a rebellion against the pull of everything that wants your time. The mind will resist because chaos feels comfortable. It wants constant movement. But once you make stillness your new baseline, noise becomes uncomfortable instead. That's when you know the training is working. Focus and emotion are enemies. The moment you start thinking emotionally, precision disappears. You make impulsive choices, you lose your rhythm, and you waste time fixing what you rushed. The disciplined mind stays calm under chaos. It doesn't deny emotion, it just refuses to let emotion steer the wheel. The weaponized mind doesn't shoot wildly, it calculates. Every thought, word, and action is aligned with a purpose. When you know what matters most, you automatically know what doesn't. Focus sharpens your priorities until distraction can't even enter the room. You stop fighting everything and start aiming at something. Training focus means training attention span. The modern mind is fractured, used to constant switching, terrified of silence. The longer you can stay on one task without escape, the more control you gain over your system. The goal isn't perfection, it's duration. The longer your focus holds, the stronger your dominance over thought becomes. A weapon is useless without aim. Focus gives direction to strength. You could have all the talent, all the knowledge, all the drive, but without focus, it diffuses into nothing. Focus is what turns potential into precision. It's how you transform chaos into power that hits the target. There's a reason focused people look calm while everyone else looks busy. They've trained themselves to separate urgency from importance. They know that doing more doesn't mean achieving more. True power comes from doing less with more intention. Focus isn't about pace, it's about purpose. Focus also requires boundaries. You can't train attention if you're always available. Every interruption reprograms your brain to expect intrusion. When you protect your time, you protect your clarity. Every no you say becomes a sharpening stone for your focus. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're essential for precision. The weapon of focus is maintained through recovery. You can't aim when your mind is exhausted. Rest isn't laziness, it's calibration. A tired mind chases comfort, not clarity. You recharge to return sharper, not softer. That's how you sustain precision over long periods, through balance, not burnout. Focus works best when it's trained under pressure. Distraction feels loudest when you're tired, emotional, or uncertain. That's the perfect time to practice. Bringing your mind back to center during chaos builds real control. Anyone can focus when it's easy. Mastery is focusing when it's not. When you train focus, patience becomes a weapon too. You stop demanding instant results. You understand that precision compounds quietly. Every small, deliberate action stacks into momentum. Focus turns consistency into dominance. The patient mind always outlasts the impulsive one. The reason most people never master focus is because they confuse it with obsession. Focus isn't about tunnel vision, it's about controlled direction. You can look up, adjust, adapt, but you never drift. You're flexible, not fragile. The trained mind moves like a sniper, slow, steady, and exact. Focus creates power because it eliminates noise. When your attention is centered, fear loses access. You stop overthinking, stop reacting, stop explaining. Every move becomes intentional. Every word carries weight. Focused energy has gravity. It pulls everything aligned toward it naturally. Training focus is training identity. You stop saying, "I can't focus," and start acting like someone who does. You choose your environment, your time, your attention consciously. Each choice sharpens your aim. Focus stops being something you try to do and becomes something you are. When you master focus, you stop chasing control because you already have it. You can't control every outcome, but you can control your precision. That's enough to shift everything. A distracted world will call you distant, but you'll know the truth. You're just locked in, focused, sharpened, weaponized, and nothing unfocused can stand against that. Power isn't in how loud you move, it's in how accurate you are when you move. The world glorifies hustle, chaos, and constant motion, but real control comes from doing fewer things with absolute clarity. Precision is the difference between wasted energy and impactful results. 1,000 unfocused efforts can't compete with one strike aimed with intention. Precision begins where ego ends. Most people act for approval, not accuracy. They chase validation instead of alignment. But power has no interest in attention. It's too focused on execution. Every precise move is quiet because it doesn't need noise to prove its strength. Precision is discipline dressed as silence. To be precise, you must learn to see clearly. Clarity is the foundation of all efficient movement. Without it, you act from impulse, emotion, or habit, none of which produce consistency. When your mind sharpens around purpose, everything else becomes irrelevant. You stop trying to do everything right and start doing the right thing perfectly. Precision demands patience. The undisciplined mind rushes because it confuses speed with progress. But real strength lives in calibration, in knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to let go. The longer you hold your focus before moving, the sharper your strike becomes. Impulse fades, intention endures. Power built without precision is unstable. You might win once, but you won't sustain it. Precision is what gives power its structure. It transforms chaos into control. The person who masters timing and detail controls the flow, not just the force. True dominance isn't about size, it's about accuracy. When you move precisely, emotion no longer dictates execution. You stop reacting to everything that moves and start responding only to what matters. Every decision feels deliberate because it is. That calm confidence people sense isn't arrogance, it's precision. It's knowing exactly where your energy belongs. The mind learns precision through observation. You begin by noticing your own tendencies. When you overthink, when you rush, when you hesitate, you study your own patterns like data. Awareness turns flaws into feedback. Every mistake becomes a measurement. Every adjustment, a sharpening. That's how precision is built, not by perfection, but by iteration. Precision requires saying no more often than yes. Every distraction disguised as opportunity steals sharpness. When you spread yourself thin, you lose control over aim. The focused person doesn't chase everything. They eliminate what doesn't fit their direction. Precision thrives in boundaries, not abundance. In a world addicted to multitasking, single-tasking has become a superpower. When you give one thing your undivided attention, the quality multiplies. Your results look effortless because they're exact. Precision makes effort invisible. People mistake it for talent, but it's really attention shaped into power. Precision doesn't rush outcomes, it respects process. You don't skip steps, you refine them. You measure before cutting, think before speaking, act before reacting. That's how small actions compound into massive influence. The person who moves slowly but precisely always surpasses the one who moves fast and messy. Power gained through luck fades fast, but power built on precision lasts. It's rooted in understanding, not accident. You can repeat it because you control it. Precision turns random success into repeatable skill. It's not about having one good day, it's about becoming someone who can't perform below a certain standard. Precision makes power efficient. You stop wasting effort on proving yourself. You stop explaining your moves to people who don't see the bigger picture. You don't need to convince results, speak the language of precision. When your actions line up with your intent, people feel your confidence before you say a word. Emotion without direction is chaos. Emotion guided by precision is art. When you channel your intensity into accuracy, everything sharpens your tone, your words, your decisions. That's how leaders influence without shouting. Precision turns passion into persuasion and control into calm authority. The mind wired for precision doesn't see time as pressure, it sees it as rhythm. You learn to move in sync with timing instead of fighting it. You stop forcing outcomes and start aligning with opportunity. When you master timing, you don't chase your position. That's how power flows toward precision naturally. Precision thrives in simplicity. Complexity is the enemy of accuracy. The more complicated your process, the more room for chaos. You learn to strip everything down to its essential parts. One focus, one method, one goal. Simplicity isn't minimalism, it's efficiency, disguised as clarity. The disciplined mind practices precision in the small things. First, how you think, how you speak, how you react. If you can't control the details, you can't control the outcome. Power isn't found in grand moments. It's built through consistency in micro decisions. Every small act of precision builds internal order. Precision also demands emotional restraint. You can't aim clearly when you're clouded by anger, fear, or ego. The calm mind sees options that chaos hides. That's why stillness feels powerful. It's not passive, it's targeted. You can't control every situation, but you can control how exact your next move will be. When precision becomes habit, doubt disappears. You no longer wonder if you're capable, you just execute. Confidence stops being emotional and becomes mechanical. You've trained accuracy into instinct. What once took effort now feels natural. Precision replaces hesitation with certainty. Power without focus burns fast. Power with precision sustains. The more refined your attention, the more control you gain over energy. You start creating outcomes intentionally instead of reacting to random ones. Precision makes every effort count, nothing wasted, nothing accidental. Precision stops being something you practice and becomes who you are. You speak less but mean more. You move slower but achieve faster. You don't chase, you calibrate. And in that quiet accuracy, power stops looking like force and starts feeling like inevitability. Because when you move with precision, the world can't help but adjust to your aim. The most dangerous thing you can do is think while emotional. Emotions distort perception, amplify fears, and make small problems feel massive. When you think emotionally, you don't see truth. You see through the lens of what hurts, what scares, or what validates your ego. Intention, on the other hand, is stable. It's thought directed by clarity, not chaos. Thinking with intention turns reaction into reasoning. An emotional mind makes fast conclusions and slow progress. It rushes to defend, argue, or prove a point before understanding the situation. Emotion demands movement, but intention demands meaning. The difference is speed. Emotion wants release. Intention wants results. The longer you let emotions steer, the more control you give away to impulses that don't serve you. Intention doesn't reject emotion, it regulates it. It allows you to feel, but not be led. Emotion screams, "Do something now." Intention whispers, "Do the right thing next." That small gap between feeling and acting is where power lives. The moment you insert awareness into that space, you move from reaction to precision. Emotion is instant, intention is deliberate. The emotional thinker wants victory, while the intentional thinker wants clarity. One fights for control, the other builds understanding. When you stop letting emotion decide what you believe, you start thinking from strength instead of survival. That shift changes everything about how you respond to life. Emotions are information, not instructions. They tell you something's happening, but not necessarily what to do about it. Anger might signal a boundary. Fear might signal uncertainty, but neither should decide your move. Intention interprets emotions instead of obeying them. That's what makes awareness a strategist and emotion a signal. Thinking with intention is like filtering noise from a signal. You start separating facts from feelings. Most arguments, decisions, and regrets come from confusing the two. Once you learn to detach emotion from logic, you stop burning energy on temporary reactions. You start conserving it for permanent outcomes. Emotional thinking thrives in immediacy. It lives in now what feels good, what feels bad, what feels urgent. But intention lives in perspective. It asks, will this still matter a month from now? The emotional mind wants to win today. The intentional mind wants to win long term. That's why one collapses under pressure while the other builds through it. The strongest minds don't suppress emotion. They delay response. They buy time for awareness to catch up. That pause, that one breath between stimulus and choice, is everything. It's not weakness, it's control. You may not control the feeling, but you control the follow-up. That's what separates calm from chaos. Emotions are like weather. They shift fast and often. Intention is climate stable, predictable, built by long-term conditioning. When you train yourself to think intentionally, you stop being reactive to momentary storms. You start moving according to seasons, not seconds. That's how you build consistency, even when your feelings fluctuate. An emotional mind burns bridges in seconds that took years to build. It texts back out of anger, makes choices from fear, and apologizes when clarity returns. The intentional mind observes the emotion, names it, then decides from awareness. It doesn't suppress, it strategizes. That's why its silence feels powerful, not passive. To think with intention, you must practice detachment. Detachment doesn't mean disinterest, it means perspective. You still care, but not to the point of losing logic. You can love and still think clearly. You can hurt and still make smart decisions. Emotional maturity isn't feeling less, it's responding wiser. When emotions dominate thought, they shrink your awareness. You only see what supports how you feel. But when you think intentionally, your mind widens. You start seeing angles, motives, timing. Clarity expands as emotion quiets. The less reactive you are, the more strategic you become. Thinking with intention also means thinking beyond self. Emotion is self-centered. It asks, how does this affect me? Intention asks, what outcome serves the bigger picture? The moment your thoughts align with purpose rather than pride, intelligence becomes influence. You stop playing defense and start creating direction. Emotions crave instant relief. Intention craves long-term results. That's why emotional decisions often feel good but cost you later. Intention asks you to hold discomfort, to stay grounded even when it burns. Because power doesn't come from reacting fast, it comes from choosing correctly. Every emotional reaction teaches you where you still lack control. That's not failure, that's feedback. The more you notice what triggers you, the easier it becomes to slow the process. Thinking with intention is not natural at first. It's trained through repetition. Every moment you pause, instead of react, is mental conditioning. Intention requires awareness of values. When you know what truly matters, distractions lose weight, emotions lose power, because they no longer align with your core. When your mind serves principle instead of impulse, focus becomes automatic. Clarity isn't something you chase, it's something you protect. The intentional thinker is calm in chaos because they understand timing. They know that responding too early can be as damaging as responding too late. Emotion rushes. Awareness waits. Patience becomes a weapon, and restraint becomes strategy. That's how composure turns into quiet authority. Thinking with intention makes you unpredictable. People expect emotional responses, defensiveness, anger, eagerness, but you give none. You respond logically, precisely, and calmly. That control confuses manipulation because it can't find your trigger. The one who can't be emotionally controlled becomes mentally unstoppable. Emotion becomes background music, and intention becomes rhythm. You still feel deeply, but you move deliberately. You no longer make decisions to escape feelings. You make them to express wisdom. That's when power turns subtle, quiet, unbothered, unforced. When you finally master thinking with intention, peace becomes your default setting. You stop being a passenger to emotion and start being the driver of direction. You see clearly, act precisely, and lead calmly. Because the truth is simple. Emotion reacts to life, but intention times creates it. Every version of yourself that ever existed was limited by what you didn't see. You weren't weak, you were unaware. Awareness is the single upgrade that changes everything without changing anything external. The same job, the same people, the same problems, but suddenly you see them differently. Awareness doesn't add more, it reveals more. It's not about improving your circumstances, it's about improving your perception. When you upgrade awareness, you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this showing me?" That shift turns pain into data and confusion into clarity. Awareness doesn't erase difficulty, it gives you the power to decode it. You realize life was never hiding, answers your perspective was blocking them. Once awareness opens that door, even chaos becomes a teacher. Most people chase external upgrades, money, status, influence, believing those will unlock control. But control doesn't come from what you own, it comes from what you understand. Without awareness, power becomes a trap. You can't master a system you don't see clearly. Awareness is what turns reaction into reasoning and experience into intelligence. Every time you expand awareness, an old version of you becomes obsolete. You start seeing through illusions that once defined your identity. Fear, insecurity, and ego begin to lose their authority. Awareness doesn't destroy the old self, it outgrows it. You evolve without effort because your perception stops working against you. Ignorance feels safe because it's familiar. Awareness feels heavy because it's honest. The moment you see yourself clearly, excuses die. You can't unknow what awareness shows you. That's why most people avoid growth, not because they can't change, but because they don't want to see what needs to. Awareness is self-confrontation without judgment. It's looking at your patterns with clarity instead of criticism. The more you observe yourself, the less control old habits have. You realize awareness is not about changing behavior by force. It's about understanding why the behavior exists. The why always dissolves the how. Every major transformation starts with a single moment of awareness. It's the moment you catch yourself repeating the same story, defending the same excuse, or seeking the same validation. That instant recognition breaks the loop. You can't continue a pattern once you've fully seen it. Awareness cuts the cord quietly, not violently. You can't heal what you can't name. Awareness gives language to what's been hidden. Fears, motives, attachments. Once named, they lose their ability to manipulate from the shadows. Awareness shines light where emotion built walls. And in that light, understanding begins to replace resistance. The reason awareness is rare is because it demands stillness. Most minds are too busy running to ever see where they're going. Awareness asks you to stop and look not forward, but inward. It's uncomfortable at first, but it's also the only way to move consciously instead of habitually. With awareness, life slows down without losing momentum. You no longer react to everything instantly. You watch patterns unfold before deciding. This gives you leverage not over others, but over yourself. Awareness lets you navigate complexity with calm precision, while everyone else rushes in circles. Awareness doesn't make life easier, it makes it clearer. You stop mistaking triggers for truths. You stop labeling people as enemies when they're mirrors. Every conflict becomes feedback. Every emotion becomes data. Awareness transforms chaos into information and pain into perspective. The untrained mind looks outward for answers. The aware mind looks inward for causes. You stop blaming, stop chasing, stop externalizing your power. You realize that every repeated experience was not punishment, it was a reflection. Awareness turns life from something happening, times to times you, into something happening, times through times you. When awareness grows, reaction shrinks. You stop being controlled by moods, opinions, and circumstances. You don't need to fight everything because you finally understand it. Power shifts from force to understanding. Awareness becomes armor, invisible but unbreakable. Most people want control, but fear awareness, because awareness demands responsibility. Once you know, you can't pretend not to. Awareness forces you to choose differently, to align your actions with truth instead of comfort. It doesn't just wake you up, it keeps you awake. Awareness is the end of manipulation, both external and internal. No one can gaslight a mind that observes itself. No emotion can deceive a person who studies its source. Awareness doesn't fight the illusion, it sees through it. And once you see through something, it can't control you anymore. You'll notice that awareness feels lonely at first. You see what others miss, and you can't go back to pretending. But that loneliness fades as peace takes its place. Awareness replaces the need for approval with the satisfaction of understanding. You no longer crave company, you crave clarity. Awareness is evolution disguised as observation. You don't have to force growth when you can see the lesson. You naturally shift from reaction to realization, from resistance to refinement. Growth stops being effort and becomes recognition, a quiet unfolding of deeper understanding. The deeper your awareness, the fewer opinions you need. You stop needing to prove, explain, or correct. Awareness gives you perspective that others mistake for detachment. You realize that silence isn't withdrawal, it's mastery. The mind that sees doesn't need to shout. Awareness is not a state, it's a practice. It must be renewed daily, like strength or discipline. Every distraction tries to pull you back into unconsciousness, where noise feels comfortable and clarity feels hard. But once you've tasted awareness, confusion becomes intolerable. You choose presence over patterns, clarity over chaos. Awareness stops feeling like an upgrade. It feels like your true baseline. You operate from a higher vantage point where nothing surprises you, because you're always watching from above the storm. The world doesn't change, your perception does. And that's the real secret. Awareness was never the next level. It was the game all along. Your mind is your greatest ally or your worst opponent. It depends on who's in control. Most people spend their lives being led by their thoughts, instead of leading them. The same mind that builds empires can destroy peace when left unmanaged. The key isn't to silence your mind, but to train it to serve your direction. When the mind starts working times for times you, clarity replaces confusion, and purpose replaces panic. A mind that works against you exaggerates problems, amplifies fears, and questions every decision. It's not cruel, it's untrained. The brain's first instinct is survival, not success. It protects comfort, not growth. But when awareness enters, survival evolves into strategy. You stop running from discomfort and start using it as information. You begin to realize your thoughts are not commands, they're suggestions. You don't have to obey every anxious idea or fearful prediction. The untrained mind reacts, the trained mind filters. You learn to choose which thoughts deserve attention and which deserve silence. That's the moment control shifts not over life, but over perception. A mind that works for you knows direction. It doesn't overanalyze every path or replay every mistake. It moves with clarity because it's been given purpose. Most mental chaos comes from not knowing what to focus on. Once your mind has a target, the noise starts to fade. The wandering energy becomes power with aim. You can't fight the mind into obedience. You have to educate it. Every time you pause before reacting, question before assuming, or observe before responding, you teach it how to serve awareness instead of impulse. The mind learns by repetition, and consistency is the language it understands. The more you train it, the more loyal it becomes. When your mind works against you, it's like living with an enemy inside your own head. It argues, doubts, criticizes, and overthinks until peace feels impossible. But the enemy turns into an ally when you stop fighting it. You start listening, understanding, and redirecting. Awareness doesn't suppress thought, it guides it toward purpose. The mind that serves you knows the difference between reflection and rumination. Reflection learns from the past. Rumination relives it. The former sharpens clarity. The latter drains energy. You begin choosing mental focus, the way you choose words carefully, intentionally, with purpose. Every thought becomes a tool instead of a trigger. Your mind works for you when you feed it the right inputs. What you watch, read, and repeat programs it. Garbage in, chaos out. Discipline isn't just what you avoid, it's what you absorb. When your information becomes intentional, your perception refines. And once perception sharpens, behavior follows automatically. The secret isn't to control every thought, it's to manage attention. Attention is the steering wheel of the mind. Whatever you give energy to grows stronger. Most people feed worry and starve focus. When you reverse that, everything changes. You stop being controlled by imagination and start creating with precision. When the mind turns into your ally, peace stops being rare. You stop needing perfect conditions to feel stable. Instead of reacting to the world, you begin regulating from within. Your mood no longer swings with circumstance because your mind has learned composure. That's when calm stops being an effort and becomes identity. The trained mind doesn't avoid emotion, it processes it. You still feel everything, but nothing drowns you. Emotion becomes data, not danger. You can experience intensity without losing clarity. That's real mastery, when your mind allows emotion to flow through without letting it flood your decisions. Your mind becomes your teammate when you give it clear commands. Unclear goals make it restless, and restlessness breeds doubt. But when you feed it structure, vision, intention, discipline, it relaxes into function. The same energy that once sabotaged your focus now becomes your creative engine. Direction transforms mental chaos into order. A mind that works for you is quiet not because it's empty, but because it's organized. You've learned to arrange your priorities so noise doesn't drown purpose. The cluttered mind chases everything. The centered mind chooses what matters. This mental simplicity gives rise to power others mistake for calm. You can't expect loyalty from a mind you constantly criticize. The inner dialogue becomes the foundation of your control. When your words to yourself shift from punishment to partnership, resistance fades. You stop fighting your own thoughts and start shaping them. The voice that once tore you down begins to build you. The mind that serves you knows balance. It doesn't overwork or overthink. It optimizes. It gives equal space to effort and rest, logic and intuition. That balance creates efficiency not by doing more, but by removing what doesn't serve. When the mental system is clean, results appear faster with less resistance. When your mind starts working with you, external challenges lose their edge. The same problems appear, but your response is different. You stop panicking in uncertainty and start calculating through it. The world doesn't become easier, you become sharper. The battlefield never changes. The soldier just learns strategy. Awareness is the foundation of a cooperative mind. You catch thoughts before they spiral. You pause before reacting. You question whether each mental pattern serves your goal. Over time, this becomes instinct. Your thoughts don't control your direction, they align with it. That's when thinking becomes a tool instead of a trap. A mind that works against you drains energy. A mind that works for you generates it. When you live in alignment, energy flows instead of leaks. You wake up lighter because you're not fighting yourself. Discipline feels natural because resistance has dissolved. You're no longer forcing control, you're embodying it. When the mind and awareness merge, your internal dialogue turns into your guidance system. Every decision becomes easier because there's no inner conflict, just clarity. You're not chasing peace anymore. You times are times peace. The mind that once created obstacles now creates order. That's the evolution of control. The most powerful mind isn't the quietest, it's the one that obeys its master. You've trained it, refined it, and aligned it until it stopped being your prison and became your partner. It works with precision, moves with direction, and speaks with purpose. When your mind finally works for you, the world does too, because it's no longer running you. You're running it. Mastering your mind isn't about controlling every thought, it's about no longer being controlled by them. The world will always test your focus, your patience, your balance. But the moment you learn to pause before reacting, to observe before assuming, and to think before surrendering to emotion, that's when true power begins. The battlefield was never outside of you. It's always been between awareness and reaction. You start to realize that your thoughts are not your enemies, they're signals. They reveal what still needs healing, what still needs clarity, and what still needs your leadership. Every time you guide your thoughts instead of following them, your mental environment shifts. Peace stops being temporary and becomes your default. The noise of the world loses power because your inner world has finally found structure. A mastered mind doesn't chase calm, it creates it. It doesn't demand control, it becomes it. You no longer depend on perfect conditions to feel steady, because stability now lives inside you. That's what mental strength really is, the ability to remain centered while everything else keeps moving. It's the quiet dominance of someone who no longer gets pulled into every emotion, argument, or distraction. When your mind works for you, clarity becomes effortless. The same energy that once created fear now fuels precision. The same voice that once criticized now instructs. You start living intentionally, not accidentally. Every decision, every pause, every reaction carries purpose. That's how mastery feels, not loud, not proud, but quietly unshakable. And as you walk through life with a mastered mind, you stop needing to prove your power. You times become times the proof. Your peace becomes your presence, your focus becomes your authority, and your composure becomes your influence. The world doesn't calm down, you simply stop letting it pull you out of rhythm. Because in the end, mastering your mind isn't about changing who you are, it's about remembering who's in charge. The thoughts may come, the chaos may rise, but awareness always wins. You've learned to lead from within, and that's the kind of power that doesn't fade, it multiplies. So when life gets loud again, remember this: your strength doesn't come from escaping the noise, but from realizing you were always the silence underneath it. That's the real mastery, the power that begins and never ends when times control your mind.